All right, we are now live. Welcome everybody who is either listening to this live or who's going to be watching the recording. So if you have ever wondered how your mindset can transform or cause some challenges for you in your career and business or just your personal life, this live session is definitely for you. So quick introduction about myself. So I'm Elena Agragimova. I've been in talent development space for over 14 years in different roles, starting from higher education to corporate world, to starting my own business and consultancy work within the space. It's something that kind of turned into a hobby and then career and a business for me. I'm really privileged to do what I enjoy every day. And I can tell you that my mindset is probably the biggest thing I had to overcome in order for me to create this space where I can truly just love my work. Maybe not 100% of the time, but at least 85% every day. I love what I do. And again, mindset is a big part of it. And I'm really grateful to have an opportunity to meet amazing people and colleagues in this field, such as Mark, who are just brilliant in the way they think and the kind of knowledge and information that they share out there. And I'm really grateful that Mark is going to be doing this live session with me. I think he's the perfect person to do this with. So Mark, I'll give you a minute to introduce yourself and then we dive into the topic.
Thank you, Elena. I appreciate the kudos and introduction. My name is Mark Stecker. I'm a trainer. I own a business called Prism of Purpose Coaching and Training, and I design, develop, and facilitate training. I'm also a certified coach. I have certifications with the International Coaching Federation, with Positive Intelligence, and with the Coactive Training Institute. And my biggest why is helping people to kind of release themselves from the mental challenges they've had with telling themselves that they minimize themselves or say they can't do things. And I struggled for a long time with my own career decisions, and eventually to the point where I decided I want to be of service to other people, and that shows up in professionally with being a coach, being a trainer, but also through the arts and through writing. So that's a little bit about me and my why.
So let's dive right in. So Mark, this topic, you and I both know, having been in this space for quite some time, that for some people they're like, oh, spare us about the mindset. And, a lot of people are skeptical around how our mindset can either, create opportunities for us or perhaps create those challenges. I have personally experienced this. The people I've worked have also experienced the ups and downs, depending on really your thoughts, your mindset, how you see things. Are you seeing things as challenges versus opportunities? Are you more of a fixed mindset person versus a growth mindset person? Are you somebody who is in victimhood mentality versus somebody who is really believes that they have the power and the kind of control to develop their own career and success and so on? And sure, there are things out there that are out of our control, like the economy, the weather, the stock markets, the number of other things that are there. But there's a lot of power that we have around what we think, how we think, the opportunities that are around us. It's really about having a mindset to see those opportunities. It's like that thing when it's like somebody tells you, don't think of a yellow car. The only thing you're going to think about is the yellow car. I feel like it's like a perfect example for it, right? So, but Mark, kick us off from your side, because you really are the expert here, and there's a lot of positive intelligence work that you do here as well. So talk to me a little bit about, like, what do you say to the critics, to the people who are like, it doesn't really work?
Sure. I appreciate the question and the opportunity to talk about this. I think there's something in the industry right now called toxic positivity. I think what I'm promoting or trying to talk about with mental fitness is that I'm not trying to say that you don't have negative feelings or that you have to feel happy all the time, to your point earlier. Um, Positive intelligence is a philosophy, but it also is based in science, neuroscience, performance science, etc. And there are ways of disrupting the negative thinking. There's a ratio that we try and go to with positive thinking that can actually be a game changer. You want to get to the point where when you have a negative thought, you have 3 positive thoughts. You want to try and minimize the negative thoughts. Again, not to say that they don't come in, but you want to be able to manage them in a way that's not going to be disruptive and allow you to go down a negative spiral, which I think a lot of us have experienced at one point in our life, especially when we're younger.
Yeah, I like that, 1 negative thought to 3 positive thoughts, because one of the things that they always tell you is like, you have to be mindful of your thoughts. And I think that was the hardest part for me, is we are on autopilot, right? I think there's number of people who talk about these things, but it's like 95% of all the thoughts we have and all the actions and behaviors that we do each day is automated. So imagine 95% of everything that we do is because we've been doing things a certain way and so on. So if you're in a position where you're, perhaps there's something in your career or business or personal life that is not going well, maybe you're just in a very miserable situation, right? And you've been in that mindset and that mode for such a long time, in the scarcity mindset, in that kind of victimhood mindset. It doesn't take one thought to get over. It doesn't take two thoughts. It takes a practice. It takes a continuous practice to replace the thoughts, the programming that you have in your mind that keeps going and going and going, to have gotten you to that particular situation. Or even if you had a good life, but then you had a huge challenge that came up and you never experienced that challenge, there's certain triggers and emotions that can also arise as a result. And this is where you have to really start to recognize, like, wait, this is a new thing. And I don't know why, but I'm starting to think things that maybe are not so healthy, or maybe you don't even recognize that you're not thinking healthy. And I think that's the key thing, is we think we pay attention to our inner chatter, but it's hard to really understand how deep it is. Does that make sense, Mark? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like, so I'm just thinking of my own experience, and I'm like, it's like, that you should be thinking, positive things, that you should be reframing certain challenges, that, but it takes years of practice for it to really get to the subconscious part of you and get all that garbage out and replace it truly with new thoughts and behaviors and actions and so on. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that you bring up a great point. And the good news is, though, you can change some of those habits after just 6 or 7 weeks. When I do positive intelligence cohorts, they last about 6 to 7 weeks. People download an app. They actually have these mini meditations that disrupt some of the negative thinking that comes up, that programming in the background, almost like we have a computer program running in our background. One thing that you can do is, when you have a situation that comes up that's frustrating, you mentioned, life circumstances. One kind of almost Buddhist philosophy is, think of every situation as a gift and opportunity. Think of your boss, who might sometimes be like on you to get something done. They're like your black belt trainer. There's someone that's there to help you, teach you tenacity, patience, emotional management. So actually, they could be your greatest gift. I know it may not always seem that way, but if you can tweak the way that you observe things that happen in life, it can be a game changer. You also have this negative thinking, to your point, in positive intelligence lingo, known as the saboteur. And the biggest saboteurs are a judge. That's judging of ourselves, judging of others, and judging of circumstances. I can't believe I did that again. What's wrong with me? I'm so stupid. And over time, like to your point earlier, you just keep bashing yourself up, beating yourself up. One of the key tenets of how to have a better mindset is to disrupt the thinking, do something called PQ reps, which is where you use one of your five senses, like rubbing your finger together for 10 seconds, or staring at something, like a picture that you've maybe seen 100 times. May you really look at the shadows and the colors, and really look at it for a good 10 to 15 seconds. And then you think of the gift and opportunity of the situation. And that's one path to having a better mindset about things. So I can talk about that in a little more detail, but that's one thing, one path to having a better mental mindset.
Yeah, let's dive in. I'm curious. I want you to talk a little bit more about that, because I think that's, again, I'm just thinking, like, people who are listening is like, how can I start applying? What is it going to do? How do I know if I'm getting better? Why 6 to 7 weeks? Like, what is, because I would imagine it was longer, honestly, but I also know the power of like meditation and just being more present and et cetera. But talk to me a little bit deeper into that.
Well, I think that there's various ways you can access mental fitness. If I can open the iris just a little bit, for example, I have a gratitude practice. Every morning, I think of 10 things from the day before, people or experiences that I give gratitude for. It's hard to be angry when you feel grateful. It's hard to feel resentful or fearful when you're feeling grateful. And I think that a lot of these anxieties that come up that disrupt our thinking, our productivity, is based in fear. So if we can find a way to disrupt that through things like meditation, like you mentioned, taking a walk in nature, really feeling your feet as you walk throughout the forest. That's using one of the five senses. Journaling, there's something called morning pages you can do every morning, like 3 pages of stream of consciousness. It can just take about 5 minutes. It's a way of data dumping some stuff that might have been running in the background, as we were talking a moment ago, that's negative thinking. So there are ways, through positive intelligence or otherwise, that you can have these practices. I think it's about routines. It's about habits. That's one of the key takeaways here is changing your thinking. Changing your habits is a way of changing your thinking. So finding ways of dipping into more positive connections would be helpful.
I love it that you have 10 things to be grateful for from the day before. That's pretty amazing. I do like 3 to 5.
You can do 3 to 5. Yeah, it's some people do 3, some people do 20. There's no like magic number.
Yeah.
And it could be as simple as, hearing the birds chirp in the morning or seeing the smile of your son when you give him ice cream or something like that. And my son's happy when he gets ice cream. So
I'm happy
it
when
could
I
be
get
any
ice
of those
cream too.
Hey, we all like ice cream. And that's a way of kind of like activating, the happy genes. So
yeah, and I like the little habits that you mentioned, just even kind of like walking on the grass, or just going for a light walk. And what I've been doing lately has been really, I've seen a big shift in just my level of calmness, but just not listening to anything. I'm a person who's always on, and so my practice this summer is to not, I mean, you know my story very well, like to not be on all the time. Before I would go for a walk or a run, I have, I'm listening to a podcast, or I'm listening to something, like I'm trying to continuously like learn something new, and etc. And I'm like, why do I keep doing this? Like, I don't have to go 120 every time, every day. And so I started just not listening to anything when I go for walks. I still listen to like music when I run, but at least it's not a podcast. At least now I moved on to actually listen to music when I run or exercise, which is hopefully better for myself. But what I think, the people who are listening, if you're not in the practice of doing these things, what I can guarantee you is that just give it some time. It just takes time, to your point, Mark. Like in some cases, like in your program, you do it 6 to 7 weeks with people, but don't expect results from day one. You might actually feel a little bit better depending on how deep on the other side you are in, like, right, how depending on the level of your mindset right now in terms of like where you are and what's happening in your life. But I think it's consistency and incorporating this like all the time, in like every day, into your routine. And it can be just a minute, it can be 30 seconds. But I think over time, you will see a shift. And in a sense that you might not even feel it until you one day just be like, oh, wait a minute, I don't think that anymore. Oh, wait a minute, now this thought that would usually, or this situation would usually trigger a negative thought or like a demeaning thought towards myself. I don't do that anymore. And it's like, it's hard to track when it will happen, but if you do it consistently, I promise, like, it's a guarantee you will get there. It's just consistent practice that really helps.
I would just add to that. I think that's a great point. I think in addition to, I think you need accountability as well, and community. I would just add those two. In addition to consistency, perhaps having a community of support. It could just be a buddy that you are going through this with yourself. Maybe someone who's already kind of heightened with their mental fitness practice or having a habit. I don't think you should go necessarily have a partner that's at the same level. I would recommend maybe having almost like a mentor partner, and then a community, having a group like a mastermind group, a group of people who support each other, who are into personal growth and development or mental fitness development. I think those three things can be game changers, because it's easier to listen to like a broadcast like this and then go away, well, that was interesting, but what can you take away to actually put into implementation? And I think that having certain habits, again, the rubbing your fingers or going for a walk or journaling, whatever your go-to is, maybe try a few of these and commit to 10 a.m. tomorrow to trying one or more of these. But remember, you should try it a couple times a day, maybe 3-4 times a day. Do something that will disrupt the thinking, start thinking more positive thoughts, and then think about the gift and opportunity of situations. Again, that's one example.
I like it that you brought up environment, because I think environment is crucial in this case. You know, it's again, my personal story. When I was in my 20s, you know, there was a point in my life where I was like, why? Like, I felt like I was in a very much a victimhood mentality. I was in very much of, it's the world, it's not me. Part of it could be just being in your 20s and like not knowing what is going on. But part, I think for me, it was also, I was just around people that just weren't great. But honestly, I was attracting those people. So it required me I literally moved away from my college town after I graduated, you know, and I started a job somewhere else, and I spent a lot of time alone because I didn't know anybody in that new city. And so what was really helpful to me is to do a reset with myself because of my own thoughts and my own victimhood mindset and my own fixed mindset, and it's the world, it's not me, and all of that. And after I spent, you know, significant amount of time on my own and just kind of like reflecting on, you know, why were those people around me? Why was I attracting? And ultimately it came down to a lot of what I think about myself and my mindset. So once I reframed that, everything has started to change. Now I'm in conversations sometimes where I'm like, I have no idea how did I get so lucky to sit or virtually talk to people that I talk to? Like, it's mind blowing to me. But part of it is because I've spent so much time working on myself and my mindset and how I view myself and the value I put out there and so on. And so environment really matters. And sometimes that means removing yourself from that environment, right? And sometimes that means being on your own for some time, because environment is really, really can be, you know, invigorating in terms of energy, or can be energy draining completely. And it's, you know, obviously some people are in situations where they cannot necessarily remove themselves from the environment, but finding ways to minimize, to set boundaries with people that are energy vampires, essentially, to people who are in that victim mentality. And it's true what they say, you know, you are the average of people you hang out with. It's just what it is. It really is true. So yeah, so we have a quick question actually. Are there any specific thought patterns or affirmations that are particularly effective for success in business or personal life? Any thoughts, Mark? And I'll also contribute after.
I think, I mean, the thing that comes to mind is just recognizing when you're having that negative thought through practice. I mentioned that, you know, there's the saboteurs, the judging of self, the judging of others, and judging of circumstances. So I think that's considered like the master saboteur in our lives. We have a different flavor of saboteur accomplices. Like for example, my top three are pleaser, avoider, and victim. So there's actually an assessment that we can put in the reply in LinkedIn, I believe. And you can take this assessment, or if you just look up positive intelligence assessment, you can find out what your top three saboteur accomplices are. And with that awareness as an example, you can say, okay, in this circumstance, I tend to want to make people happy because I'm someone who's empathetic, because our greatest strengths turn into these saboteur accomplices. And there's actually 9 of them in addition to that judge. So I think to answer your question, maybe focus on the judge at first, is maybe do some reflection, whether it's journaling or as you go for a walk, or when right after you have an interaction, to say, did I just judge myself? Did I judge someone else, or did I judge my circumstances? Like, this always happens to me. There's not enough resources in my job, so I'm always failing. You know, look out for the judge. That would be one of my pieces of advice. And then maybe take something like that assessment, or read a book like Leadership and Self-Deception. That's a great one where you put people, you put yourself inside a mental box. That's a great resource as well to start being more aware of your thinking patterns.
I like that. Yeah, the thinking patterns is probably the key. And that's the hardest part. It's like, there's a reason why we know what we need to do, but it's so hard to do things, whether it comes to health or fitness or mindset or career or business. And that's because we're stuck in the same routines, same patterns of thinking, to your point. And it's recognizing it's those 0.0001 seconds that are required for you to catch yourself thinking that thought, to catch yourself reacting, that you have to stop and not let your mind go on autopilot. And I think that's the hardest part. So I would spend personally, I mean, that's where I spend the most of my time, is like, wait a minute, like, where's that coming from? And not just, oh, okay, this is happening. Why am I thinking that? Where is it coming from? Is this thought true? Like, how can I reframe that thought? And it's just a continuous practice. And then you become much more aware about what's happening in your own mind between your ears.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And made me think of something from Mel Robbins, who talks about the 5-second rule. So to the questioner's question, if that's correct grammar, there's something you can call the 5-second rule, where if you don't want to do something, you count backwards from 5. You don't count forwards, you count backwards. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then you tell yourself before that you have the intention of taking an action or not thinking about something a certain way. And there's something physiologically that causes a shift, so that you will find that maybe you will take action, or you will stop thinking, or you'll shift your thinking. So maybe look up Mel Robbins as one way, the 5-second rule. That's something that kind of might add as your tool chest. So
we have another question. How do our subconscious beliefs influence our ability to succeed, and how we can program them for better outcomes? I think some of the things that we just talked about as well, we could definitely apply. Anything else comes to mind here, Mark?
These are great questions. Although I'm not a neurologist, I'm going to do my best to answer that. Just give me a second. Yeah, I'd say that kind of what we were talking about would definitely apply to that. I think just being aware, if you have a routine and going back to habits, I would definitely recommend maybe journaling first thing in the morning, and or right before night, and capture some of those thoughts, so you can start picking up on some of those patterns or beliefs. We all have limiting beliefs, fear of success, fear of not being enough. Imposter syndrome is big, especially when you put yourself out there. When you put yourself out there, maybe you have an subconscious belief that if you put yourself out there, you'll start losing friends. Well, I mean, I don't mean to scare anyone, but you probably will lose some people who don't have the same mindset and want to succeed and excel in life. And maybe they're not your people, and you'll find new people. I promise you that. So those are some thoughts on that.
Yeah, again, like it's a guarantee that as you grow, if people with you are not growing in the same kind of trajectory, or at least parallel, you grow together, it's very likely you will lose those people. And you don't really lose them. You just, everybody moves on. That's just life. And I think accepting that is important, right? And but anyway, that's, so your environment really, really does matter here. Something that is a little bit out of the field here, but something that I've experienced lately that I think, I'm sure there's a lot of studies around this, but our level of thoughts and our level of decision making, and just how we operate in terms of the clarity of the mind, is not just about the thoughts. I think that's a big one, but it's also about what's happening internally in our bodies. And where I'm getting with this is that there's been a ton of studies around gut-mind connection, right? And so if you are, if you're not sure where to start, I would say just focusing on your health as well. Something that I've gone through recently, I think, Mark, I've shared this with you, but then Tara and I talked on our session with her, is the gut health. And something that I've done is I've kind of done a bunch of different tests to really try to be at my peak performance, because I felt like I was like, okay, like doctor tells me I'm healthy and my blood work is great, but I felt like something was still missing. And so I did like deeper tests and found out that I have a lot of things that I'm a little bit sensitive to certain things like caffeine and coffee and certain foods. And the minute, particularly when I cut out caffeine and coffee, it's been a couple of months now since I've cut those out, and I've cut out alcohol pretty much as well. And the minute I cut those things out, I'm much more clear. My emotions are much more intact. I'm able to respond a lot better to situations. I'm more in tune with my thought process, because my body is not working hard internally to try to process the different toxins that are not good for me, like the coffee and caffeine. So I feel like it's using its energy to actually make me more productive, sharper, smarter, and so on. As crazy as it might sound to some people, there is actual science behind it. And so I think remembering that there's a health piece, especially gut health piece, to the way we think, to the level of stamina that we have, to the level of resilience that we have, because we cannot be eating like crap, being jacked up on caffeine, and try to be creative and respond emotionally intelligent and so on. And I can tell you, I've been much more calmer, much more in tune with my body, with my thoughts. I feel like things just kind of like balanced out in my head. I don't know how else to explain it. It sounds silly, but like I really feel like I feel like that's what it was, And that's because each of us has sensitivities. Each of us have certain things that our bodies like and don't like. And to be at our top performance, we have to really dig deeper beyond what our just doctors say, right? Like to look at alternative medicine, to look at integrative medicines, and really try to, again, just make sure your operating systems internally are operating at their top levels. So that's been a big game changer for me as well. Thoughts are a big part of it, but just health and overall wellness contributes significantly to my success.
Yeah, I would definitely agree to that. And then add on, I do CrossFit, for example. And when I don't do it for a while, I can tell a difference, but it definitely is a level up. And they say that when you level up a part of your life, all raises all ships. I think your standard raises with other parts of your life. But that also includes your need for rest and to recover. You mentioned earlier that you would take that walk and you listen to that podcast. Well, your brain needs rest too, and you eventually recognize that. So, it's been a hard lesson for me with sleep. I mean, sleep's a big thing for me. I'm trying to get that under control. And I think listening to some relaxing music or someone doing like a mini meditation, guided meditation is one way I've found as an example, as a habit that can help with that. Also, you mentioned gut health. If I might just interject something.
Yeah, please.
I did a presentation recently for a group on the three brains. So we actually have neurons in our gut, our heart, and our cranial brain, and they actually talk to each other. So you want to keep those three organs, of course, all your organs, but those three organs in particular, because you have the same number of neurons as a small cat's brain in your gut, which is a lot of neurons. So they're constantly talking to each other. There's more of a direct line. So just something to keep in mind when you're thinking about health and wellness is, I think, making sure that your organs, your body is cleansed, you detox, you rest. You know more about that than I do, but I've just can find it's a game changer when we take care of notice our wellness and take care of our overall health. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a game changer. Let me see if we have any other questions popping up. What are some misconceptions that people have maybe around thoughts and mindset and positive intelligence? And what are the biggest, I guess, objections that you hear from people when maybe when you talk about these topics?
I think people are skeptical. They think about positive and toxic positivity, where it's just about thinking positive and it's going to change everything. So just coming back to a little bit what we were talking about before, just saying again, we're not preaching that you need to be happy all the time or positive. I think fulfillment is a better word, versus happy can be fleeting, I think, but fulfillment, I think, is over time, based on habits, based on practices, based on some of these mindset things that we're talking about the wellness things we're talking about. So I think some of the misperception is that once you're happy, everything will be solved. That's, again, part of the judging of circumstances. I'll be happy when I get that job. I'll be happy when I have an amazing podcast and people love me. Then I'll be okay. So it just depends. Trying to think if there's any other misperceptions. I think just zooming out just a little bit, people think that they don't know what a coach is. They see Tony Robbins, they think that every coach is either Tony Robbins or they stink. I'm not getting results right now, but people don't realize that to have a better outer life, they have to work on their inner life, and that takes time. And sometimes it's seeing a version of yourself that maybe you're not always willing to look at. There's a great book, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers. And part of the premise of that is embracing those sides of yourself that maybe you don't always show to other people. And that's about mental fitness to a certain extent as well. There's people who are really successful, their shadow grows even longer. So they have to accept both the light and dark side of themselves to really be authentic and have greater success. So.
Speaking of Tony Robbins, this was a few years back. That's when I was living in Dubai. And I remember Tony Robbins came and he had a show and his talk or whatever. And I had a number of people that I knew that went to it. And then we had a dinner at the same time. So people who went to the show then came to the dinner. And of course, everybody was kind of pumped up. And like the couple of people that showed up after the show, and they were like, motivated and just ready to go, because Tony Robbins he's great at what he does. And he's definitely, you feel like you want to just change your life after even watching a video with Tony Robbins, right? So kudos to him for that. But what's interesting is that you know, those same people a couple days later, they just kind of like went back to their regular self. And that's because motivation itself doesn't work like that. Motivation by itself doesn't work. What works is, to your point, starting to create certain behaviors and actions, self-awareness. Like that's where it starts. It starts with you. You know, it's like the famous quote is like, you know, instead of trying to change the world, try to change yourself first. Like that's how you change the world, is by changing yourself and being the best that you can be. And motivation doesn't work in that sense. It's more about, you know, and positive thinking alone doesn't, to your point, right? Like it's a tool in a toolbox. It's a tool that you can use to create that fulfilled life, right? But there's many other tools like health, and maybe part of it is motivation. Maybe it's your environment, maybe it's your habits, it's your routines, it's just who you are, and so on. So all these tools then help you create that life, create that career that you truly want, right? But it doesn't start externally. It doesn't start because you bought a coaching session with somebody, or you went to a show with Tony Robbins, or you did one test, that whatever it is. It starts with you, and then it starts with consistent behavior change, consistent actions. Otherwise, positive thinking is just wishful thinking, and it's free to dream and it's good to dream. But there are a lot of dreamers out there and not enough doers. So I think combining the two is where the magic happens.
Yeah, I would say that, and it's to kind of add on to that, I think it's about agreements. I think it's about agreements with yourself. It's about agreements with maybe a accountability partner or the community. So if you go to one of those events, and they're great, I went to his UPW event. There is a workbook, and you do set up, you know, goals and agreements. So just following through those agreements. Think about that book, The Four Agreements. It's a great book, and one of them is be impeccable with your word. Are you keeping your word with yourself? Are you keeping your agreements? If you keep your agreements, it affects your mindset. It affects your state. Tony Robbins is all about state. You know, your state affects your whole life. So that, again, going back into mental fitness and you know, just moving things forward. Again, it's not all the time. We're not trying to tell everyone that it's going to be 100%. It's not. You mentioned yourself, 85% of the time, you want to be
Yeah.
happy with what you do with your career, and that's, you know, and that's great. That's fantastic. That's a B plus. It's something to be proud of. So it's all, I think, mindset, giving yourself grace. And for me, one of the things I lean into, in addition to those 10 things I feel grateful for, I have another set of practices I won't get into. It lasts about 10 minutes total. But one of the things I do is talk about self actualization, getting to the point where you've risen to like your highest point. You never quite get there. But two foundations of that are self acceptance and self empowerment. So I think accepting where you are, you're exactly where you're meant to be, and that you're willing to step into your power and use fierce courage to get there is all about mindset and all about commitment. So
Mm,
that's some
I love
thoughts on
that.
that.
I love that. We should do a whole live session just on that
I love that.
together.
Thank you.
Well, Mark, I appreciate you, and I appreciate you being my accountability partner. We've known each other for a couple of years, and I've learned a ton from you. And just like every time we chat, it's just a reminder of like certain thoughts. And I know like you always check me like when I say certain things, and I'm like, so you've been definitely like a really, really huge contributor to my own thought process over the last a number of years. I think it's been a couple of years, maybe even more, that we've known each other. So I very much appreciate it. I hope that people reach out to you if they want to learn more about positive intelligence or the work that you do. So do drop that assessment in the comments as well. And guys, like our LinkedIn is right there. Feel free to connect with us. You know, follow us on LinkedIn if you're not already following us. Mark and I also did a podcast on my podcast called The Shift with Elena Agad. Look it up on YouTube, Google me, feel free to get in touch. And yeah, hopefully you took something away from this and walk away with a slightly shift in mindset.
Thank you, Elaine. This was great. It was always a pleasure. I appreciate it.